and welcome to the latest episode of the Lisa Pezik Show. Excited today to have a guest with me, Rhonda Rees, who's going to be sharing, does she have a story, several stories about overcoming hardships that interrupt your life and interrupt your business. And hello, if you've been living in 2020, 2021, this is like one big interruption and one big hurdle that we've had to overcome and really come together as a family, as a community, as a world. And I really believe that interruptions are going to happen. So you've got to have a plan. You've got to be in the right mindset and headset and heart set and soul set to be able to work through this. And that's exactly what Rhonda did. And I can't wait to dive in with her today. Rhonda, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome.
Oh, thank you very, very much. I'm very happy to be here.
Oh, so good. So let me tell you about Rhonda Rees. She told me before we hopped on, it's her 40th anniversary in PR. So she's been around the block, right, doing public relations. She's an award-winning veteran in this field of PR. She has an independent and is in charge of Rhonda Rees Public Relations Company and Aseity Press Publishing. And in 2008, Rhonda was named as one of the 5 most powerful publicists in Hollywood by People Maven. And I asked her if she'd name drop a little bit before we get on. I said, have you worked with, any celebrities? And she was saying Johnny Depp. And she did things with Demi Lovato that came to some of her events. So that's always awesome to have somebody that's been around the block. She is the author of the highly acclaimed book, Profit and Prosper with Public Relations, Insider Secrets to Make You a Success, and is also a recipient of the Publicist of the Year honor from the prestigious Bulldog Reporter publication for media awareness and a campaign she orchestrated to bring attention to online book piracy. Now, she's worked with authors, celebrities, as we said, Fortune 500 companies, manufacturers, fire and safety firms, attorneys, politicians, environmental companies, financial planners, and nonprofits. She's an active member of professional business and civic organizations, and she has served as president of the former Publicity Club of Los Angeles. Whoo, sister, you've been doing good things. So on paper, it's like, here's Rhonda, she's winning at life. Everything is good. She's with celebrities and getting awards but you've been through some stuff in this 40 years and recently some stuff. So tell us how you came up with this idea of business interruptions, because what interruptions have you had in your business, in your life?
Well, yes, I certainly will tell you and your audience all about business interruptions. I had been working steadily, as you say, in public relations and book publishing. And I, unfortunately, along with many other people, was a victim of the big Woolsey Fire that was in the end of 2018. And it took my home, and I had a home-based business. So my office too, along with, hundreds of other people in surrounding areas, many people in Malibu lost everything, including myself. And, nobody really prepares for such a calamity. It just happens at a moment's notice. Mm-hmm. And, so what happened is I went to bed like I usually do. This was on November the 8th of 2018. And around 10 o'clock or so, the phone rang, and it was a friend of mine and said, they're evacuating people in your area. And I said, really? There had been a fire earlier in the day, a couple of fires, and they were burning out of control, but they were far enough away, I thought. So I went and opened the door and smelt the smoke. And I got dressed immediately and started getting some robocalls. And the strange thing is that my car was in the shop that at that time, and I couldn't pack up the car with things and that. So I made arrangements to get a ride with a neighbor of mine, and we left at about 3 a.m. And I grabbed what I could fit on my lap, basically, and went with her to her mother's house. And the next morning, we found out that our homes and office burnt down, and I lost everything.
Wow. And you know, as you said, that's not something that a lot of times I think people think that's never going to happen to me. You know, that happens to other people. But it's so hard when, you know, as you said, nobody can prepare for that. And I think that's a part that makes you human. When you realize that you're not invincible, you're not untouchable.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the problems with that particular fire is there were a lot of other fires burning out of control. I'm in Southern California, but many of them were up in the northern part, and they were very, very short-staffed with proper personnel, firefighters and that. So it was a real seat-of-the-pants situation. And, you know, but it's, you know, what do you do when something as disastrous as this kind of a calamity happens? You're unprepared, you don't expect it, you're kind of in denial. Right. And it sinks in, and you say to yourself, well, yesterday, 24 hours earlier, I had everything. I had my office supplies, I had my book inventory, I had whatever, and now it's completely gone. And you have to start all over again from scratch. So what do you do? You know, how do you get through such a time? And there, you know, really there is no rule book at all. And you just have to put one foot in front of the other and know that you're probably not the only person that is experiencing this. That helped me a little bit, because of other people. It wasn't just me, but sometimes the calamity could just be your one place, or there may be a hurricane, there may be a flood, there might be an earthquake. It could be just about anything.
Right. And that period where you could feel like you're all alone because you're in this experience, having this experience, but yet, as you said, not alone, and that unfortunately other people, you know, it was a community that was ravaged. It was a city. It was, you know, a state that unfortunately had, you know, I know people, my mentor at the time had to be evacuated. Luckily, he was able to keep his home. The firefighters were able to get there, but I know that was a very scary time. Even me being in Toronto, being in Canada, being in another country, worrying about, you know, people that I know that were involved in this. So we really are connected. We really are together in this.
Oh, absolutely. And with 24-hour news coverage on cable TV, you feel like it's right in your living room. And so you can be all over the country or the world and know what's happening. But what I decided to do for today is I put together kind of a business interruption plan for your audience and your listeners, what you need to know and what you need to do if something like this were to happen.
Yep. Please share with us. So give us the steps. I was going to say, how did you rebuild your business? How did you rebuild your life?
Right.
You come back stronger than maybe you were before.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, it was trial and error. Now, I did have a few things already in place. One of the major things was you definitely want to have, if you have a home-based business, you want to have homeowners insurance. And there is something that I learned that I did not have, and I wanted to pass this along. There is something called business interruption insurance.
Huh.
And this will help to cover lost income and other things, I believe, the furniture and whatnot for the business. This is something that wasn't really explained to me, or I didn't ask about it because you never really think about something like that. But had I had business interruption insurance, that would have gone a long way to help me at this crisis time.
Yeah.
But I had really, really good homeowners insurance. And because I had a home-based business, it took care of that in a way. And I had a category called ALE, which is extended living expenses. And that allowed me to stay at hotels or rent an apartment, pay for meals and things like that. That was a good category. And the one thing about these major disasters, like what I went through, is people don't realize just how long a time it's going to take to get your life back. Now, that disaster happened a little over 2 years ago. And believe it or not, I am still in the process, and same with my neighbors, of getting their lives back.
Wow.
So it isn't an overnight thing, and it could take about 3 years or so, or it just depends on the severity and what happened. But so it's very important to have good insurance. Now, on top of the insurance, there was another fire that had happened about a year before our fire, and you may have heard of this one. It was called the Thomas Fire. And that one was also in a similar area, more like Ventura County, and Woolsey was more LA County. But this Thomas Fire taught a lot of people a lot of good things to do in the event of another disaster. So our fire, Woolsey, benefited greatly from the knowledge and the experience of the people that were handling the Thomas Fire. And one of the things that they learned, which was really incredible, is when you have such a big fire like I did, you will lose absolutely everything. So that means you're going to lose very, very, very important paperwork, your birth certificate, your business forms, the pink slip on your car. You might lose your marriage license. All kinds of things, your passport, things that you would not necessarily think of. So I would suggest if your listeners have a strong box or have some kind of a box of some kind, to really put all those important papers that you could grab at a moment's notice. And I would have grabbed all that, but because my car was in the shop, I had to get a ride from my neighbor, as I said. There just wasn't room in her car.
Yeah.
And so it might be a smart idea to have it on computer, and you could take your USB stick or pen drive or something. But some of these real important documents, you may be worried about security issues. So if there's a way to have the original paperwork in a box or something that you can easily grab. Now, with the Thomas Fire, the folks that were in charge of that, when it came time to our fire, they actually set up a building. It was a government building. It was in our area. And what they did is they kept this building open for, I think, 2 or 3 months, every day, evenings and weekends, maybe not Sundays, but they kept this thing open a lot. And they invited all the specialists, people from the DMV, people from the electric companies and the gas companies. They invited people that were in charge of documents of any kind. They also had people from charitable organizations. And what they did is they set up rooms in about 2 floors of this office building. And they let each of us come in there and reobtain all of our important paperwork in one go.
Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome.
It really, really was, because we were able to quickly meet with people. Now, even though this process was faster than it would have been if you tried to go on the phone and do this, it still took several visits to this building. It didn't happen exactly in one time, but you could cover quite a lot of ground and meet with the people and get your life back easier.
Yeah. Now, what about your clients? Did you have contracts with people, and were you actively?
Oh, yes.
Like, did
yes.
you let them know, or how did that affect your business? Were you worried about losing clients, or what happened there?
All of the above. As a matter of fact, 2 days before the big fire, I met with a potential new business client, and because of the fire, I lost out on that. I also had a couple of existing clients, and they were more than understanding with me. One in particular, I was just in the middle of a run with, and I had to make arrangements. I had to think very quickly. And what had happened was we were in the middle of a campaign, but I was able to put him on hold. And in my place, I knew of a very good social media person. And I had him meet with her instead, and she did his social media for about 3 months or so while I was still rebuilding my situation. And then I was able to seamlessly come back and do traditional PR for him. It was going to be kind of the other way around. I was going to do more traditional PR first and then do social media, or we were going to work in tandem, but it just lucked out, and it worked out on that score that we were able to do it. There was another client that I basically lost. And this, it's a very sad thing, because what if you're in the middle of something real crucial? Or I would have asked a colleague to take over if it was real critical, and I would have supervised that.
That's why it's so important to know, to have other people in the industry, and again, just strong connections with someone that if you can't, for whatever reason, nothing that you planned for, but if something happens, that you can at least say, hey, go to this person and they'll help you while I'm dealing with rebuilding from a fire, or a tragic death in my family, or an illness, or whatever has happened, whatever interruption.
Yes. Well, at the beginning of your introduction, you were mentioning the COVID crisis, and I know we've all had to be very good at modifying the way we do business. And of course, we have Zoom meetings, and we have safe social distancing and masking and things. But back then, it was more on just having a specific disaster that happened. But you have to be creative, quick on your feet, and sometimes you can't always get your client back, or most will understand, but it just depends on the circumstances. And now there is another organization that I learned about called the Small Business Administration, SBA. And they're an agency that will assist and get assistance from the government, possibly to help with a business loan. So that may be another consideration, to contact them. And that organization was at that building that I was mentioning, and they were meeting with people, and you could fill out applications. Also for FEMA, for disasters and relief and things, that is a possibility. The other very touching aspect of this was many charities and many nonprofits and very benevolent people in the public and business people were very, very good at giving us donations. And most of that happened in the form of a card from a merchant, retailer, restaurant, you name it. And we also got money donations, which was great. And they were not taxed. You didn't have to pay taxes on them. And in addition to that, as you were mentioning, I've been an active member of some professional business organizations. And one of them, the Small Publishers Artists and Writers Network, called Spawn for short, they set up a GoFundMe page specifically for my business because I did not have that business interruption insurance. So they stipulated that the donations would be used for me to rebuild my office equipment and things.
Yeah, it's amazing how people will, when you're good to people and you're generous and you're of service, see that come back to you is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Let's talk a little bit about, well, actually, before we jump into PR, that was not the only, I remember when we first met, that was not the only interruption. Did you get lost somewhere or something you were telling me about?
Oh, yeah. Well, if I had an incredible string of luck, or I don't know what you would call it, bad luck maybe, but what had happened is, 6 months before the fire, I was taking a stroll in kind of a wooded area near where I lived, and I was very familiar with the trails, and I'd done it a lot of times, and it was supposed to be just a quick, few minute hike around, and I did this, but what had happened is they had some rains recently, and the terrain looked different, the paths looked different. Long story short, I got very, very lost, and it got dark on me. I wasn't smart. I didn't take phone or water or anything. It was just supposed to be a very quick little hike, and I ended up all alone. It was pitch black, and I got very, very lost, and I hurt myself and cut up my back and scraped my knees and fell down and got dehydrated, and I ended up spending the night there all alone. And luckily, the next morning, I walked and hiked and couldn't figure out where I was. I screamed all night, couldn't get any help, and then I luckily found a patch of dirt that looked somewhat familiar, and I made my way out to safety. But then 6 months later, the Woolsey Fire happened, and I lost everything. And then 1 year later, I got an unexpected phone call from a hospital that had my brother in an emergency situation, and he suffered an unexpected brain injury, and I've become his caregiver. So in 1 year, and then we had COVID.
Wow, that's a lot of loss and change and scary stuff to happen. How did you stay sane throughout all of that? How did you cope with all of that?
Well, it was a big, big challenge. I think what happened was being lost in the woods really helped to prepare me in a strange way, because I had to use some incredible survival skills. I was trapped for 12 hours, half a day, all alone, didn't know if I was going to make it out alive. And I had to use certain skills and things I told myself. I sang songs in my head. I didn't really cry because I thought, well, nobody's here to hear me and I need my energy to get out. And I was using every skill imaginable. I had been a Girl Scout a long time ago. I had camped in the woods. I'd gone to summer camp as a kid, and whatever I knew from before and learned, and I had a lot to still live for, and loved ones and things. So it kept me motivated. But when I survived that big ordeal, by the time the Woolsey Fire hit and I was faced with such a calamity, I just said, well, why don't you apply the skills and what you learned in that other experience that's still fresh in your mind to how to cope with this. And then once I got through the Woolsey Fire experience, then the thing that hit for my brother, I said, well, if you've been through these two other things, why don't you apply what you learned from both of those experiences? And I was really, really, really grateful to be alive and still here. And I do have a very strong spiritual sense and a belief in a higher power and God and all that. And it really did help.
The word that kept jumping out at me when you were talking was purpose. You still had stuff to do.
It wasn't time.
Yeah, right. And as you said, not that you ever want to say that when bad things happen, I think sometimes we get lost in that, find the silver lining and just get over it. And I think sometimes society expects us to bounce back a lot quicker than sometimes we're ready to cope with.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
But in a way, as you said, that tragedy and those situations prepared you when the fire hit, that you knew you were resilient and that you could get through hard things.
Yes, and this may sound odd, but the night that I spent in the woods, I made rocks for a pillow, and I had a thin jacket on, and that became my bedding, and I blew into my jacket to keep warm overnight. And I just said to myself, and I was sort of fantasizing while I was doing this, and I thought, well, maybe just pretend you're in a Radisson or a hotel or something nice out there that you could just pretend you're there and you're not really here, So I kind of, not that I tricked myself, but I try to make it more palatable that, hey, this, and then I just sort of fantasized also at the time. And I thought, well, if I'm trapped here and I never get out and I never live again, I really won't have any material things anymore. I won't have my home. I won't have my belongings. I won't have the comforts of home and things. And the thing I really wanted more than anything was a glass of orange juice and a glass of water. And I thought if I could just have those two things, I'll be so happy, because I was so dehydrated. And so it put the priorities in order. And I was absolutely thinking that way just 6 months before it actually happened to me that I didn't have my belongings anymore.
Wow. The mind is so dang powerful. It's crazy.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So tell our listeners who maybe have heard of PR, or I think a lot of times people think PR is, when I kind of introed and said, Johnny Depp and Demi Lovato, and they feel like PR is for the celebrities only. Explain to them a little bit about what exactly PR is and who it's for.
Oh, yes. Well, I got my training, and the majority of the PR that I actually do is for regular business, everyday people that no one has ever heard of before. And I think the real art form to public relations is, how can you take a complete unknown product or service or person or author, or you name it, and make it fly, make it interesting, make the media want to give them attention and get their word out and their name out and their information out. And so it's the real art form of a public relation person to come up with something that we call the right PR angle or hook. And that's an idea or a suggestion that describes the product, the service, the client, the business, and makes it interesting enough so that the media will want to cover it and give them space in the newspapers, magazines, on radio, on TV, online, through social media now, and make it happen.
I love that, because I think a lot of people do themselves a disservice by saying, well, I'm not important enough, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not big enough. And here you are saying it's not anything it's how interesting, or what is the right angle or hook to get.
Right. And the thing is, I have always felt in all these years that there is an angle in everything. And not to toot my own horn, but to be honest, over these 40 years now, I have literally seen it all, heard it all, watched it all for many generations. And I can tell you right now, I have never had a situation where I haven't gotten some coverage for a client. And as I say, most of these clients have never done much of anything that people would recognize or hear of. So I have to really think outside the box, be creative, and come up with a snappy angle and get them attention. Now, I can give you an example of that if you want.
Sure. Yeah, please.
Okay, well, let's use the example of the fellow that got his business in. My business was interrupted for the Woolsey Fire. I didn't explain what he was or who he is and what he did, but he is a psychic detective, and he helps people solve mystery cases of lost loved ones and pets and things. So this is very interesting. I used the disaster timing to actually have a better campaign for him in the long run, because when I was representing him before the fire, we were going down a certain track. But when the fire happened and the business was interrupted, when I came back, I came back some months later. So I came back, the fire happened in the fall, I came back in the spring. And what I was able to do is I thought to myself, well, I'd like to get him some good coverage and publicity. And I remembered that he told me that he specializes in lost pets and being a psychic detective. So what I did is I tied the media campaign when I worked with him again on something called National Pet Month. And National Pet Month, I believe, was the month of May. And so my campaign with him was a month or so before that, leading up to this big National Pet Month. And I tied in his skill and his service with this National Pet Month. And because it was time sensitive and immediate and something the media wanted to cover, I got him all kinds of press attention in TV and radio and print and you name it.
I love that. It's like, not that you're not capitalizing on the time, you're showcasing someone's strength at that time when they are needed the most, or at that time when they are relevant.
Exactly, because the whole trick with PR is to tie in that angle with something newsworthy or a holiday theme or something resonating with the public. Now, if somebody had been a super mask manufacturer prior to this COVID crisis, this would be a very interesting tie-in with the need in society or something. Or if there's a new tax law that got changed and you're representing an accountant, well, with PR, you would connect the dots and push about that tax change or something, and then you have the expert that could talk about it.
Yeah. How do you know that is there a right and wrong time to have PR? How do you know that?
Well, put it this way. What's very interesting is this same psychic detective, I had been signed on to help a month before the fire, which would have been October, and I was going to do October, November, December. We were just doing a 3-month, and it was going to extend after that. But the thing is, at that time of year, originally, we wouldn't have been able to use the same angle of National Pet Month because that wasn't until May. So a lot of this is timing, but I would have come up with some other angle instead.
Right. So there never is really a wrong time. You just
never. It never. It just, but the stars aligned with that particular event, and then the media perceived it and saw it as more immediate because National Pet Month only lasts that one block of time, so they needed to interview him more right away, and that's always a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So if this is your last day on Earth, because we never know when a disaster is going to strike, and would you say that you're going back to that purpose, in your business? You had to kind of reestablish and get back up again with business, and then obviously you're your personal life was just turned upside down.
Oh, you bet.
Rebuild. You had to really rebuild. Did it make you, I know you shared about, appreciating little things, like you just wanted a nice glass of orange juice
and water. Yes.
Did it make you really think about, when it comes to the end of your life, or like living now here in the present, is there anything you would tell our listeners to really help them get present, or did your perception change?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I like to make every moment count. And one of the ways I've been doing it, and I did it before these disasters, but I really have a little bit more credibility doing it now. I make use of my social media, Facebook, for example, and I like to send out messages of hope, of inspiration, of stick-to-itiveness, of pleasant pictures, things that will cheer people up, because, when you die, the one thing that I really realized after the fire is you can't take stuff with you. And all you can take with you is who you are as a human being, how you've treated people, how you've gotten along, the contributions you make to society and things like that. So that really and truly hit home, because when I lost everything, I was at a certain stage of my life where I still had more life in me, but most of it has been behind me. And right now, I'm not materialistic at all. I'm still living without much in the way of furniture, and I'm no longer attached to material things, little things. I used to have an extensive book collection, that's gone. So I said to myself, well, Rhonda, you should know what it is you read about by now. Just staring at a bunch of books I've already read is interesting, but I said to myself, well, maybe now you have to go and fly. Maybe it's put to the test, all those lessons you thought you had to learn. The other very interesting thing that I remembered is I used to collect trinkets and sage the house and have little incense or crystals or objects or rabbit's feet or whatever. And when I was trapped in the mountains, in the woods, I said to myself, no rabbit's foot, no Lucky Charm, no four-leaf clover is going to get you out of here. And it really hit me. And I thought, the only thing that's going to get you out is your wits about you and God or higher power and thing. And after that experience, when I'm finally in a new home and getting settled, I no longer really need to buy those objects or buy all this stuff that I thought was going to help me somehow. Because I remember very vividly, when push came to shove, none of it matters.
Wow. I love that thought so much. I love that you just shared that. It just goes back to the power of investing in you and your health and your happiness and your mindset. And, as you said, no crystals and no rabbit's foot will get you out of there. It was your wits about you. I love the way you said that and framed that. That's so true. That's so true. Instead of looking external for the answer or the guidance or the right next step, you've got to go internal to what you are.
Well, thank you. And I'm glad I was the age that I was when this all happened. Had I been in my 20s or 30s or whatever at the time, I might have perceived all this as more of a real hardship, and I might have really grieved a lot and been upset, and I might have put a lot of power into these objects and the books and the trinkets, and I might have thought I lost something major, But by the time I was the age I was at, and at the stage of my life, I said to myself, there's something very freeing about not having to deal with all these things and not having a lot of baggage.
Yes, 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 yes. And I think that's so important for entrepreneurs and for business owners to realize how resourceful you can be with not a heck of a lot, how much you can do with not a heck of a lot, because it's not about, as you said, don't put power into the things, put power into yourself.
Absolutely. And even to this day, when I see advertisements online or on TV or whatever, and they want to sell their this and their that, or their objects of whatever kind, I say to myself, well, it's not necessary. And I don't mean to put down their business, because that's how they make their living. And I'm sure it helps others and gives comfort. And it did to me before all this happened. But I realized that, and after the fire, this may sound crazy, but I literally stayed in 22 different places in a year. I stayed in hotels, I stayed in motels, I stayed in people's homes, I did house and pet sitting. And all I could do was take with me what I could fit in my car to go to the next place. And I really and truly didn't want a lot of things, and people wanted to help and donate, and I got a little bit of clothing and things, and that was very helpful. And I got some odds and ends around for the kitchen for the future. But it was almost better at the time to get a gift card, because many well-meaning people don't understand that people are sort of living like gypsies and might be on the run, and you just don't want stuff.
Yeah. Wow. I guess, not that you want to advocate to lose everything to have that perception, but what a beautiful flip on that it literally took losing everything you had to be able to realize what you have now and what really matters in life.
And yes, you put that very, very well, and especially because I was one of the rare exceptions that my car was in the shop, and even if I wanted, we had a couple of hours notice before we evacuated officially. Technically, if I had my own car, I could have packed it up with a few things.
Yeah.
But I couldn't. So it was as if fate was saying, Rhonda, you're not going to have anything. All I had was this shirt on my back and just less than a week's worth of clothes and some toiletries and a couple of papers, and that was it.
Well, I love the fact that you're here and you're doing podcasts, and
Oh, thank you.
You've shown that even in the darkest of times or the roughest of situations, that you can make something good of it, and you can still continue. And I love how you framed it. It's a business interruption. It's not a business closure. It's not a...
No. As a matter of fact, on the flip side, I had never been so busy since I got back on my feet. And during the whole COVID crisis, I had more clients then than in a long time. And most of all the clients I represented had some sort of an angle that had a connection to the COVID crisis. So that it was a full circle moment.
Yeah. I love that. And how can they get in touch with you if they want to book you for interviews or find out about PR or follow up with you?
Well, the best way is the website, www.rhondarees, RHONDAREES, like Sam.com. And I'd be more than happy to communicate with your audience and go from there.
I love that. And I will make sure to put your contact information in the show notes so it's there and easily accessible for our audience. Rhonda, I could have just kept going like on and on and on with you. Thank you so much for giving me your time and your expertise. And I know you were really putting a lot of thought into this interview, and I want to honor you for that. I know my listeners are going to love this. So thank you for being here with me today.
Oh, thank you very, very much. It all went by so fast.
It did. So thank you, listeners, as well, for being here, tuning in, taking these stories that you hear of inspiration to know that very first point that we talked about, that you're not alone. You're never alone. Even when you think you're the only one dealing with this hardship or this thing that you got to navigate, you're not alone. There are resources there to help you. There are people to help you. There are sources of inspiration like Rhonda to show you that it is possible to get through whatever it is that comes your way. You are resilient. You are capable. You don't need no crystals. Well, maybe you do. But like Rhonda said, it's all about the wits about you and you being really the shining star to get yourself out of whatever situation has happened to you. So thank you for being here, and we'll see you again next time on The Lisa Pezik Show.